leading Britain's conversation.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day. When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour. Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage.
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 The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Well, it's Trump again, isn't it? Because within the last few minutes, he's signed an executive order to begin construction of the US-Mexico border wall. That big, beautiful wall. He promised it throughout the campaign. He said, I'm going to build a wall, and everybody thought he was absolutely mad. And even madder, he said the Mexicans are going to pay for it 100%. Let's just remind ourselves, it's a 2,000-mile border between the US and Mexico. And many people thought this was going to be completely impossible. Let's remind ourselves of the Donald in full campaign mode.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively. And it's going to get built fast. And it's going to look beautiful because someday they'll call it the Trump Wall. Who the hell knows?
Well, that was Donald at his absolute modest best. And today, interviewed on ABC News, this, now that he's president, is what he said.
Are you going to direct U.S. funds to pay for this wall? Will American taxpayers pay for the wall?
Ultimately, it'll come out of what's happening with Mexico. We're going to be starting those negotiations relatively soon. And we will be, in a form, reimbursed by Mexico, which I've always said.
So they'll pay us back?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yes.
So the American taxpayer will pay for the wall at first?
All it is we'll be reimbursed at a later date from whatever transaction we make from Mexico.
Mexico's president said in recent days that Mexico absolutely will not pay, adding that it goes against our dignity as a country and our dignity as Mexicans. He says, quite simply, they're not paying.
David, I think he has to say that. He has to say that. But I'm just telling you, there will be a payment. It will be in a form, perhaps a complicated form. And you have to understand, what I'm doing is good for the United States. It's also going to be good for Mexico. We want to have a very stable, very solid Mexico.
When does construction begin?
As soon as we can. As soon as we can physically do it. We're
within months?
I would say in months, yeah. I would say in months. Certainly planning is starting immediately.
He's going to do it. There's no doubt about it. But Trump aside, is it right that a country should be able to put up physical borders, or are we all global citizens? That's my question to you. Well, my view perhaps won't surprise you. I think good fences make good neighbours. I think not to have borders is complete madness. And I would say that what we saw in Berlin before Christmas perhaps sums it up. We have free movement of people within the European Union, a debate, of course, that featured heavily in our referendum. But we've never been members of the Schengen zone, the Schengen zone where you can move freely within those Schengen EU states without ever being stopped, ever showing a passport. And what happened was that horrendous truck killing in that Christmas market, that the most wanted man, not just in Europe, but at that moment in the world, was able, with impunity, to catch a train, to cross the border to France, and then on to Italy, where, frankly, by chance, he was caught. I think the point about no borders, the point about Schengen, the point about free movement, is it doesn't just allow good people to move freely, it allows bad people. It allows terrorists. It allows Kalashnikov rifles to move freely. And I think a dose of common sense is coming back into this whole argument. I think people are realising that actually you do need to protect your borders, particularly in an age of international terrorism. But my question to you isn't just about Trump. It is, I repeat, Is it right that a country should put up physical borders, or are we all, as some believe, global citizens? To get involved, call me on 0345 6060 973. Text me at 84850. You can tweet me on @LBC, and don't forget the hashtag Farage and LBC. And you can watch the show live. Go to LBC's Facebook page now, as larger and larger numbers of you are doing, and the phones are going mad already. Daniel in Brentwood, is it right that a country should be able to put up a fence to protect itself?
Good evening, Nigel.
Good
First
evening.
of all, I just want to say, I spoke to you a few weeks ago, it's good that Trump has stuck to his word like I knew he would and like you do. But I 100% believe in walls. Walls have been around since day dot. The Chinese constructed the greatest wall in the world to keep the Mongolians out. The Romans built the wall in Scotland at Hadrian's to keep the Northerners out of mainland England. And we've also had a wall built at Calais, which has slightly reduced the influx of migration onto British trucks into Europe. We need walls where there is soft borders, obviously, where there's no water, there is no body of water to separate land. And I think a wall is a fantastic idea to separate Mexico from the United States of America.
So you're with Trump on this, yeah?
110%. 110%. He has to secure that border in any which way he can to prevent the mass migration of the people who are going to be detrimental to the US. 100%.
But when he says he's going to get Mexico to pay for it, does that sound a bit far-fetched to you?
Well, America has the physical power and the muscle, obviously, to ensure that happens. He obviously financed the war originally through American taxpayers' money, but as well as I do, America have the clout to, they could put an embargo on Mexico if they needed to. It doesn't matter to them. They will be able to extract the money back later.
I've got a little thought, Daniel, on how he might get the money, and I will tell you all later what I think that is. I think Trump is playing this rather more cleverly than often people give him credit for. Daniel there, in support of borders and walls, and makes the point that in Calais, which I go through almost every week, suddenly there are massive fences, and British truckers are having less of a hard time. Bob in Wallington. Bob, is it right that countries should be able to put up walls, or are we all global citizens?
Well, Nigel, thank you very much for the opportunity. I don't think the wall is going to be a good idea, because once you're trying to restrict people coming into your country, if they want to come in, they'll always find a ways. I think America should be helping Mexicans and help the economy. I don't know, all the details about their relationship, but the Mexicans somehow always find to get to America, whether they build a wall or not.
Surely if you put a border up, if you put a boundary up, if you put a wall up, it makes it harder, doesn't it? So surely that must bring a degree of control, Bob.
I think it's, the century we live in, putting up a wall, it's not the way to actually making good relations with your neighbors. I'm sure the Mexicans, the way being Mexicans, they will find to get into America. I think the Americans need to help the Mexicans' economy and educate them and help them in other ways so that they don't come to their country in the first place.
Well, Bob, here's the problem. The estimate of how many illegal immigrants are currently in America, many of whom, if not most of whom, have come through that US-Mexico border. The lowest estimate I've heard in Washington from people I've met is 11 million. The highest estimate is 25 million. And people in America are furious about this. 10, 25 minutes, whatever it is. The fact there are sheer numbers like this that have come into America illegally, people are furious about, particularly, incidentally, Hispanics who legally came into the country and live in Florida or elsewhere, many of whom voted for Trump. And Trump was elected, Bob, on two things, effectively. One was to put people back to work and to make America better off. And isn't it funny? The Dow Jones today went through 20,000 for the first time ever. So, business America's supporting him. But the other is he wants to stop illegal immigration. Bob, if he doesn't build a wall, what on earth else does he do?
Well, if he does build the wall, he's just going to alienate himself from the rest of the world. He's not making a massive good word for himself. And a wall is not the answer, Nigel, because in my opinion, make so many walls, everything you do, the people won't stop coming. And
okay,
also,
Bob, I get that, Bob. Bob, you've made your point that a wall's not the way forward and that Trump will make America a bit of a global pariah. Texts and tweets coming in. Tweet here, Schengen was a good idea when it started, but not now. Nothing wrong with showing passports or ID cards. The Trump wall is a waste of money. Bit of a mixed message there, I guess, but comparing Europe with America. Tweet, I'm no global citizen. Protect borders or become a third world nation. Text, it is the prime duty of government to protect its people and therefore its borders. Anything less is a dereliction of duty. And that's from Mike. And tweet, why can't the US and Mexico share the cost of a wall? From Alan Goulding. Alan, I think I may have partially the answer to this coming up soon. I wonder, what does Ben in Dartford think? Do walls make sense or should we all move freely? As Jeremy Corbyn called us, global citizens.
Oh, thanks. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Farage. I 100% agree with the caller who said that we should have the wall. You know, we need to protect, like, our citizens and stuff because it's important. Because if we don't, I believe in peace by strength. What about you, Farage?
Well, Ben, I haven't got your surname, sadly, but no, I would rather agree with that. Look, I genuinely think that good fences do make good neighbours. I think that Schengen, in the case of Europe, was a dream that belonged to a post-war period where we did not have the threat of international Islamic terrorism. The game has changed. And any idea, that we now have a European identity, frankly, when we're under threat, it's nonsense. We're German, we're French, we're British, we're Italian. And actually, I think, Ben, that the big events that are coming up in 2017, and I'm thinking about the elections in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany, and possibly even Italy too, I think that the Schengen zone, I think the free movement of people, I think the reintroduction of borders is likely to dominate those campaigns and the result of them. Is that clear enough, Ben?
Yes. I think it was a catastrophe that they didn't have any borders in Europe in the first place. Because we're like the UK is the only country that has a proper border, and I think liberals tend to like this sort of, they have this sort of approach. Anyone can walk into our garden,
Well, we've been lucky, Ben. We've been lucky. We've had the English Channel, although despite the fact we've had that, you could argue the British government hasn't done it all that well. Ben, thank you. Facebook messages now coming in. Lee Moffat says, illegal immigration needs prevention, not encouragement. Well, that's what walls are supposed to be for. Donny says, just what the world needs, more walls. It has always worked in the past, hasn't it? Bit of sarcasm there. And Leah from Harlow says, it's just a border. What is the problem? Well, I have to say, Leah, I rather agree. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC. It's 7:15.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
I'm asking you, is it right that countries should be able to put up physical barriers to protect themselves, or are we all global citizens? And you are responding. Facebook messages. Lorraine Devlin says, funny how millions of tourists visit the Great Wall of China. Everyone looks at that in awe. Stephen Hapgood suggests we get the Romans back to rebuild Hadrian's Wall. Please don't take offence, Scottish listeners. Ricky Mitchell says, when you buy a house and look at the deeds, it shows you the borders of your land. So what is the difference? And that is the general tone. And it's into this debate about building walls and whether it makes sense in the modern world or whether it's something that belongs back way, way in the past. I mean, don't forget the Berlin Wall came down, didn't it? Now, the Berlin Wall, of course, wasn't to keep people out, it was to keep people in. But you'd have thought, wouldn't you? Many do, that once the Berlin Wall fell, there'd be fewer walls in the world. And yet, into this waded the Donald. Let's hear again what he said in the campaign.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively. And it's going to get built fast. And it's going to look beautiful because someday they'll call it the Trump wall. Who the hell knows?
I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing. I mean, I like the bloke, but my goodness me, he's out there, isn't he? And when he said that, everybody said he's mad. It's bonkers. How on earth can you build a wall on that scale in the term of a presidential election? So let's just do a little fact check, shall we, on Trump's great big, beautiful wall. So the length of the border between the US and Mexico is 1,989 miles, but 1,255 miles are the Rio Grande. Another 24 miles are the Colorado River, leaving only 710 miles of land border. And during the Bush administration, and I didn't hear anybody, I mean, he may have been criticised over Iraq, but I never heard Bush slagged over this. But during George W. Bush's time, 600 miles of fence has already been constructed, each of them composed of steel and concrete. So actually, when you look at it, it's not completely impossible to build this wall. Indeed, George Bush did it before. So those of you that think Trump's crackers, it's beginning, I think, to look a little bit less balmy. But when he says the Mexicans are going to pay, surely he's gone too far there. No, I've got the answer. 350 million legal crossings take place every single year between Mexico and the USA. They are nearly all Mexicans who cross the border to work in the USA because they earn higher wages. You know, if I go from Kent to Essex, I have to pay £2.50. If I want to cross into Wales, it costs £6.50. So given you've got that number of people, all you need to do is charge people a fee, a daily fee for crossing that border that the Mexicans pay. $5 a day, $10 a day, whatever it is, they'll still pay it because the salaries are bigger in America. You see, as with everything with Donald, he does it with flair. He does it in a way that makes some people cheer, makes others totally outraged. I hope I've explained to you the logic that actually he signed the executive order today and this wall can and will be built. And whether you love him or hate him, one thing's for certain, he's going to keep his promise. This is not just about Donald Trump. It's about the general principle of should countries build walls to protect their borders, to protect their people, to prevent, if they possibly can, international Islamic terrorism, or is that completely wrong? And are we all global citizens, and should we be free to move everywhere? And I wonder what Richard in Pembroke makes of that question.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Now, you touched on this earlier about the impracticalities of it, because so much of this border is river, lakes, I believe, are involved. There's a mountain range. So it's kind of pretty impractical. But to go on the impracticality again, I visited a few years ago a place in Valencia, and it's at least 10,000 years old, this painting, and there's a couple of blokes using a ladder. You know, is Donald aware of ladders?
Well, I'm sure he is. Richard, Richard, can I just disagree with you on one point about impracticality? Where you've got the Rio Grande and the Colorado River, you don't need to build a wall because they are damned difficult and very dangerous, life-threatening to cross. So the point I was making in practical terms is that actually we're only dealing, I say only, with 710 miles, of which 600 already has a fairly significant border fence. So, Richard,
but
surely,
again, as with ladders, there are things called boats. You know, I mean, it seems to me as if you and Donald need to look into the technology a little bit. Boats and ladders, you can cross rivers.
All right,
and you
okay,
can
Richard.
Over walls.
So
you can climb over walls with a ladder.
So what should he do? Just forget about it and say, "Come on down." As many millions of illegals that want to come can come. And what would you do if you were him?
What I think he should do is stop doing what you are doing, which is dog whistle politics, stirring up division and hatred. He knows now that people in America, some of them, are going to declare open season on Muslims, on Mexicans, on anybody who isn't quite like them. And it's really dangerous, Nigel. What you do...
So is the message, Richard?
It's incredibly dangerous.
Is the message, Trump, you're an idiot. You're an idiot, Trump. Why don't you say tomorrow that anyone in the world, anyone, whether it's 100 million or 1 billion, anyone in the world can come to America? Is that what he should do?
Of course not.
Oh, right. So what should he do, Richard?
He should continue with controlling his border, as he does at the moment, as we control our border. Despite what you say, we have a controlled border. We're not in the Schengen area.
So,
you keep on saying these things which the gullible people will take in, but they're not true.
Well, Richard, in our case, of course, there are nearly 500 million people who have a passport that says upon it European Union, and of course we're part of that. But I mean, if Trump doesn't build some form of barrier, if Trump doesn't employ, more border guards, how on earth does he control the number of illegal immigrants coming into America, which is making, and by the way, this is not stirring up hatred, this is making ordinary tax-paying Americans angry, and rightly so. Without a barrier or a wall, Richard, what on earth should he do?
It's knee-jerk dog whistle politics.
Well, you've said that for a second time. I think you're running out of steam, mate, aren't you? Come on. I'm going to ask you for a third time. What should he do to control the border if he doesn't either build a wall or put more guards along it?
Put more guards along it, fine. No problem with that. Give people jobs. I don't have a problem with that at all. But this stupid idea of a wall, it's just for gullible people. It's just for gullible people.
Well, so do you think that Trump really is going against the global trend by suggesting building a wall?
The global trend of populism and dog whistle politics. No, he's going along with it. You're going along with it.
Well, it's
Richard. Maybe Vladimir is telling you to go along with it.
Richard, you must have had a be awful 2016, because actually what happened in 2016 is that nation-state democracy made a comeback, and part of that is controlling our borders. Thank you for that. On Facebook, Peter Hulbert says the problem with walls in Mexico is that Mexican drug dealers are better at tunnels than climbing walls. Okay, I mean, listen, I'm not for one moment suggesting that a wall is perfect, but I think he has to show he was elected to reduce illegal immigration. He's got to do something. And Hugh says on Facebook, we have the White Cliffs of Dover. Even that doesn't stop him. Well, yeah, I'm not sure there are that many rope ladders going up the White Cliffs of Dover every day. Most immigration into Britain is legal, and that's a point that is well worth remembering. I wonder what Tim in Ellesmere Point makes of this. Is Trump bonkers when he says he wants to build a wall, or does it make sense?
Hi, Nigel. I'm a Telegraph reader and a Brexiteer, so I just wanted to just quickly say thank you very much for everything you've done first.
Thank you.
And I actually came up with the phrase Romaniac, and my channels on the Telegraph was discussed was... on The Guardian, was the Liam leaving, and on the Telegraph was Je suis voting to leave, which was quite popular. But anyway,
good. Well done, you. Now, tell me about this question, though.
Yeah, there was a wall built a fair while back between Wales and Chester. You might remember the Chester Wall, the Romans built.
Yes.
That did a fairly good job of keeping them at bay back then, and it was needed then. Obviously, we wouldn't want to fence the Welsh off now, obviously, but back then it was needed. And it did a very good job. So I think, you've got the problem in America where the Mexicans come over the border, do contract killings, and then disappear back to Mexico. Things like that. There's only about 100 miles of border still open, and with the fence not there, well, fill it in, So I know they're going to still tunnel under and possibly in some places get over, but if they're getting over the wall, shoot them.
Tim, this is a very hard-line approach to it. But you're quite right, of course. I mean, British POWs spent much of their time building tunnels, so walls themselves are not perfect, Tim. I agree with you. And I'll ask James in Cambridge, what does he think about this big, beautiful wall?
Hello, Nigel. I've been listening to your callers. Just to touch on a point that the one before the last one there made about tunnels. It's a very salient point, really, because anyone who uses YouTube and has watched documentaries about drug cartels, etc., they have millions to invest in digging tunnels. So it should be a 3 or 4 pronged approach. You shouldn't just be looking at building a wall. You should be using sonar and getting the National Guard or whatever, and start investing in that. If you're going to do it properly.
James, I mean, listen, you are so fully thought through on this that the next time I get the opportunity to meet the US president, I'm going to say there's a bloke called James in Cambridge who has thought this through absolutely fully. And you're right, James, a wall on its own simply isn't enough. But the big question I'm asking you all is, Trump aside, is it right that a country should put up physical borders, or are we all global citizens? No one yet has said that to me, but I'm waiting. Please call me. Come on, come and have a go. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Rupert Bartier.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
I'm asking the question, is it right that countries should be able to put up physical borders, or are we all global citizens? And my goodness me, you're responding on Facebook. Peter Reynolds says, do you have a garden fence? If so, what's it there for? I will tell you. It's to stop your neighbours coming into your space. Tom Mason says, Nigel, it's not just people. Weapons moved around Europe as easy as you like. Yeah, I said that, Tom, earlier, that the freedom of movement of people within Schengen means Kalashnikovs move freely too. Robert Hull says drones will be patrolling the wall. You're with it, Robert, on modern technology. Maybe they don't need to pay for hundreds of border or thousands of border guards. Maybe drones do the job. And Bill Cole says an authentic wall will send a message that anyone that crawls under or climbs over will know they'll be prosecuted and returned to their country and perhaps banned for life from ever entering the country. Where are you? Callers, texters, tweeters. Where are the Corbynites? Where are the global citizens? Where are the people that think we can move freely everywhere? Please call me. Meanwhile, into this debate about walls, during the presidential election, came Donald Trump. Here's a reminder of what he said.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively. And it's going to get built fast. And it's going to look beautiful because someday they'll call it the Trump wall. Who the hell knows?
Well, I have to say, I don't know how many walls Donald's built. Churchill, in fact, was a very, very keen bricklayer. Whether Donald himself will roll his sleeves up, I don't know. But here's a fact for you, and a very interesting one. The Berlin Wall, I think we would all perceive to be evil. It was a wall not to protect a country, not to stop people coming in. It was a wall to stop people getting out. And, of course, the Berlin Wall fell. And we all thought, those of us that are old enough, that that was a very good and a great thing. And I sort of teased earlier and said, well, of course, in the modern world, I guess walls don't belong anymore. Well, here is a fact for you. That since the Berlin Wall fell, 65 countries have erected fences or walls or borders on their territory. Nearly a third of nations in the world since 1990 have begun to put up walls, barriers, borders, or have plans to do so. And indeed, you know, right across Europe, it's happening. The Hungarians have put up physical barriers with Serbia. The Greeks have put up physical barriers with Turkey. The Spanish have huge walls in their enclaves out in Morocco. And you know, why is it that when Donald Trump says he wants to build a wall, he's slammed internationally as being some evil person, when 1 in 3 countries in the world in the last 25 years have begun to erect barriers? Interesting, isn't it? Alex in Ebbsfleet, are you a global citizen, or do you think walls make sense?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, you will be able to hear that I'm not from UK. I'm Mexican, actually.
Right, okay. Well done. Good.
I just been transferred to UK.
Yeah.
My daughters are born in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And my 6-year-old daughter at the moment speak Italian, Spanish, and a little bit of English. So I definitely think that there is that global citizenship pretty much into it. I do think, of course, that wherever you go as a global citizen, you have to respect wherever where your host country. And I do think that every country has the sovereignty to do whatever they want in their borders.
Yes.
So, well, in that regard, I do think that everyone should be allowed to come in as long as we are respectful on where we are going.
Well, Alex, I mean, you have a very interesting backstory and a very unusual backstory, but, you know, when you say that everyone should be allowed to come in, I mean, we've in this country been compared to most of our European neighbours, actually, post-1945, very open, very welcoming, and we definitely had, until a few years ago, the best integrated society in the whole of Europe in terms of, different religions, races, etc. But Alex, we ran this with really quite strict control. I mean, net about 30,000 people a year came to this country, sort of 50, 60-year period, and now it's 1/3 a year. I mean, are you suggesting, Alex, that we should just say, look, anyone that wants to come in Britain can come and live here?
Well, I think I take your point. I think there needs to be controls. I think, of course, you cannot open the doors to everyone. What I'm trying to say is that as long as there is a ordered process and people is respectful of where they're going, well, I don't see why they shouldn't be welcome.
But Alex, there could be tens of millions of people who are very respectful of the United Kingdom. But I mean, surely you can't use the word control in the same sentence as saying that anyone who's respectful can come.
No, I see your point. What I'm trying to say is, again, nowadays, with globalization and with things going on, not talking about citizens of the world, I think it's just denying reality. And so with so many industries moving around and with so many integrated companies, many of the people that is working abroad, working for those companies, need to move freely.
Yeah. No, Alex, listen, Alex, I do understand that. We are living in a global economy. There is a need for companies to move expertise and people around the world. I completely get that. And I certainly don't want, Brexit to be something that impoverishes us because we can't bring in people, who can do valuable things. I just want us to make sure that we train enough of our own people. Alex, thank you very much for the call. Vitor on Facebook says to me, not controlling borders is saying that democracy is meaningless. Well, certainly in the case of the British referendum, I think you got a point. Glenda says, I'm a global citizen. I am British. I'm sorry, I'm not a global citizen, I'm British. Well, Glenda, OK, I get that. Jason Weston says, instead of a wall, why does he not set up a permanent deportation team to patrol the streets of the USA with biometric technology to prove, Jason, what kind of world do you want to live in? I mean, that is a little bit scary. Tweet, walls are the best way of preventing illegal immigration. Look, most people, Alex phoned in. He was very much a global citizen in terms of where he was from and where his daughters were born. But even he thinks there should be controls. Come on, Jeremy Corbyn, ring this programme. Tell me why open borders are good and why being a global citizen is really your first identity, more than perhaps the idea of a nationalistic concept of being British. Charlie in Kingston, is it right to build walls or are we global citizens?
Hello, Nigel, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I personally don't agree with borders. Everyone should be able to travel wherever they want. Just because you're born in a certain country doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to go wherever you want.
All right, Charlie. So what do you do for a living, Charlie?
What do I do for a living?
Yeah.
I'm currently unemployed.
You're currently unemployed?
Yes.
And do you think that if we opened up our doors unconditionally to people from incredibly poor countries who would take literally any job they could, that would make your life prospects better?
Well, if you go down to the hospital, what is half of the working force? They're not English, are they?
No, because, Charlie, we're not training enough of our own people, and that is the problem. Charlie, the line's rotten, otherwise I wouldn't let you go, I promise you. Paul in Manchester, should we be putting up walls? Will it stop illegal immigration, or should we just let it all hang out and become global citizens?
Hello, Nigel.
Hello.
I voted Remain, but I have to admire your tenacity. Well done.
Thank you.
The problem isn't building a wall, which is actually a fence, as you rightly pointed out. The problem is, if you look at history with the Chinese wall, and first of all, the principle of wanting to control illegal immigration is perfectly reasonable. And whatever barrier you need or control you need to put to that. The problem is as with the Roman Wall and the Great Wall of China, is building the wall is probably the cheapest part of it. I work I'm an architect actually by training. The real cost in this is the ongoing garrisons and money you have to put probably every kilometre along it, because people are fantastically inventive finding ways around barriers. And, you know, at the end of the day, a fence is not going to do it. You need people and resources. And
Or Paul, drones were suggested. I mean, would drones help, and would that reduce manpower and cost?
Well, you know, everybody, you know, we like to see movie films where drones can do this and do that, but the reality on the ground is that you need boots on the ground. I mean, that's, you know, the drone could be flying over it, but by the time somebody gets there, the people are long gone, undercover.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Paul, you're right. Of course, you're right. A wall on its own can't do it. Paul from Manchester being incredibly pragmatic and sensible. Text here I like. Nigel, so Champagne socialists don't agree with the principles of walls and barriers. Maybe they'll take down the security gates and the CCTV at their luxury London properties. Well done, Rob. I agree with that. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, the Nigel Farage Show.
In the light of Trump signing an executive order to begin construction of a great big beautiful wall along the Mexican border, I'm asking you, is it right that countries should be able to put up physical borders, or are we all global citizens? Now, so far, most of you that have called and tweeted and texted have thought, yeah, it is right. We've had some difficult conversations about the definition of what control may or may not be, but there are some global citizens now responding to my plea and getting in touch. And Hans on Facebook says there is plenty of space for more people in the UK. Just look on Google Maps and turn on satellite imagery. So Hans says we should just open up and let as many people come as possible. And Tom texts me, he says, no, you're stirring hatred. Calling most Mexicans rapists, thieves and murderers is exactly that. Tom, I know some of the language that was used was pretty inflammatory, but he did go and visit the Mexican president, and he did say he liked the Mexican president, and he did say Mexico is a great country, and he did say that Mexico was plagued with drugs and drug dealers and drug money, and guess where they're getting the money from? They're getting it from the USA. And what Trump thinks is by building this wall and improving security, he will stop those people getting access to big US money, and that'll be better for America and for Mexico. Now, whether that actually works is a separate question. I don't know, but that's what he's thinking. And just to leaven it, Fred from Wimbledon texts in, Nigel, I wonder how these global citizens would feel if ISIS were on their doorstep. I'm asking that question. Is it right that countries should put up fences, walls, barriers, or are we global citizens and should we be free to move? I wonder what Paul in Buckingham thinks of this.
Hi, Nigel.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. I hope my line's okay. I think it's a bit crummy where I am.
It's all right. Okay? Crack on.
Okay, great. I just think it's such a shame that the global situation is the way it is. We're paying, I suppose, not a price, but it's just the historical reasons of having walls today. It's just based on our historical, our religious and cultural differences throughout the ages, and people protecting their cultural interests and different religions. And unfortunately, it's the same as today, but it's gone one step further, of course. It's to do with the monetary side of things and the way the social things work, the circles work. And I think we're both. I think we are global citizens. I do feel that we all would love to have a free world where we can just roam around different countries freely. But unfortunately, it's not like that. So therefore, we do have to protect our interests, and the wealthier countries need to protect their people and their interests. The wall, is it an answer? Probably not, but it's the only thing we've got to do at the moment. The drone situation, I don't think is a good point at the moment. I don't think technology really will give us that to do that. So that's really my uptake on it. Really, it's I think that we would all strive for this utopian world where we can all live.
Oh, but Paul, we've tried utopia. It was called communism, and it was such a disaster. They had to build a wall, not to stop people getting in, but to stop them getting out. And
I suppose communism would work if it was worked out in a good way. But yeah, you're right.
Paul, there is no utopia, and I pointed out to you just 20 minutes ago that it's a remarkable thing but actually 1 in 3 countries in the world have begun construction on walls or barriers of some kind since the Berlin Wall came down. It is the trend, and I'm just amazed that when Trump suggests it, now maybe it's his style, because he does kind of go for it a bit, but it's amazing that Trump is demonised for saying it when a third of countries in the world have begun the very same project in the last 25 years. Paula, thank you. Hakan in Milton Keynes. Hakan, are you a global citizen?
Hi, Nigel.
Hello.
Well, to be honest with you, I think it's not as simple as global or not. If we put our emotions aside, I think everybody would love to be a global citizen, but the truth and the reality of it is, you have to protect your nation in some way or form, be it a wall or not. The fact is, you have to have a border in place. I do believe that is the case, or some way of controlling this. It's the same as your home. You wouldn't have your home open, your doors open whilst you sleep at night. You want to protect your family, and you choose who you let in your home. The other side of this is, there's some valid points from people, from both sides actually, but I think we're forgetting something here as well. That the fact that it's not all the time of what you say, it's how you say it. And it does come across very aggressive. It comes across quite racist, but the honesty is it's probably patriotism, and there's a thin line between racism and patriotism. So, I think it's got some valid points. It's just the way you say it.
Yeah, I mean, Hakan, I get that, and I do understand that the Donald, goes for it in a way that is. I mean, I feel like a sort of shrinking violet introvert when I'm with him. I mean, he really does go for it, and maybe that puts people's hackles up. But the basic points that he makes, which people condemn as outrageous, more often than not, turn out to be true. Text message. We, the British, are building a wall in Calais. We really are, and we're spending a lot of money on it. And I'm pleased to say, and I mean this, as someone that goes through Calais almost every week, it is making a huge difference. I think motor car drivers, of which I'm one, feel safer. Lorry drivers feel just a bit safer. Hi, Nigel on text. If borders don't matter, then why don't we dig a foot tunnel to France with no border controls? Steve in Cheam. Thank you, Steve, for that. And a tweet here from Steve Burke. I don't want to be a global citizen. If the rest of the world is so great, why do they all want to come here? Well, they want to come here, Steve, because this actually is quite a great country. And we've got to make sure, particularly in an age of terrorism, that it stays a great country. Sarah in Wandsworth, are you a global citizen or do you believe in barriers, walls and borders?
Oh, hi, good evening. How are you?
I'm very well, and you?
Good, yeah, good, thank you, good. So I agree with you that I think every country has the right to protect their borders. However, I do think that everyone, as a previous caller says, has the right to travel to whichever country they like, considering they're a decent citizen within their own country and don't have any, crimes against them. So I think the issue with the US is probably more about, controlling who is coming in, build the wall, have more people on the ground, letting them in. But, it's the manner in which Trump has sort of called these citizens of Mexico sort of some derogatory terms. And I think that's sort of what's confusing the situation.
No, Sarah, I get that. However, it is undoubtedly true that a border that is not being looked after properly with Mexico is a means of trafficking people, is a means of moving guns, and is a means for the drugs gangs to make their money and get back to Mexico. And, I do understand what you're saying, that he does do things in a certain way that put people's backs up, but actually I'm defending him on the basis that a lot of what he says is true. The question, Sarah, is, does building this wall reduce guns, reduce drugs, reduce people trafficking? What do you think?
Well, I think, people will find a way to do those things, unfortunately. I think it will, without a doubt, help put better eyes on the situation. But I did have a question to you, which was just, when we leave the EU, and should Scotland decide to have a referendum and they leave Britain, how would you feel about a wall being built between Scotland and England?
Well, obviously Hadrian's Wall is a starting point for that project. No, look, Sarah, I mean, honestly, I don't want the United Kingdom to break up. And you know something? I don't believe that it will. The SNP's argument is running into the sand. Oil is 50-something bucks a barrel, not 113 where they base their numbers, and to ask the Scottish people to join a European Union, which have been committing to joining the euro and joining the Schengen area, the very thing we're discussing tonight, Sarah, it isn't going to happen. It really isn't going to happen. Well, look, thank you. It's been a very lively debate on this subject tonight, and I'm not surprised. And I know that Trump inflames huge passions when he says he's going to build a big, beautiful wall, but it wasn't just a campaign pledge. He meant it. Today, he signed an executive order. Look, I know as well as anybody, we had some very sensible, practical callers tonight, that building a wall on its own doesn't solve all the problems. But what it does do, particularly as a symbol, is to show that, firstly, Trump is keeping his word to the electorate, and secondly, that he means business. And it won't just be a wall. There'll be border guards or drones or whatever it may be. And for those of you who feel that you're global citizens, who are upset by what is going on here, remember, this isn't just Trump. 1 in 3 countries in the world, since the Berlin Wall fell, have actually started to put up barriers, fences, walls of some kind. You cannot, in an age of the threat of Islamic terrorism, do any other, particularly in a democracy, than to be seen to be protecting or doing your damnedest to protect your people. So, you know, we're going to see a lot more of barriers and walls. We have an English channel. We've got an advantage. I just wish we looked after it better. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively here on LBC. I'll be back tomorrow at 7. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you, Nigel. You know, as well as I do, America have the clout to, you know, they could put an embargo on Mexico if they needed to. It doesn't matter to them. They will be able to extract the money back later.
I've got a little thought, Daniel, on how he might get the money, and I will tell you all later what I think that is. I think Trump is playing this rather more cleverly than often people give him credit for. Daniel there, in support of borders and walls, and makes the point that in Calais, which I go through almost every week, suddenly there are massive fences, and British truckers are having less of a hard time. Bob in Wellington. Bob, is it right that countries should be able to put up walls, or are we all global citizens?
Well, Nigel, thank you very much for the opportunity. I don't think the wall is going to be a good idea, because once you're trying to restrict people coming to your country, if they want to come in, they'll always find the ways. I think America should be helping Mexicans and help the economy. I don't know, all the details about their relationship, but the Mexicans somehow always find to get to America, whether they build a wall or not.
I mean, surely if you put a border up, if you put a boundary up, if you put a wall up, it makes it harder, doesn't it? So surely that must bring a degree of control, Bob.
I think it's, the century we live in, putting up a wall, it's not the way to actually making good relations with your neighbors. I'm sure the Mexicans that were being Mexicans, they will find to get into America. I think the Americans need to help the Mexicans' economy and educate.
Completely impossible. Let's remind ourselves of the Donald in full campaign mode.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively. And it's going to get built fast, and it's going to look beautiful, because someday they'll call it the Trump wall. Who the hell knows?
Well, that was Donald at his absolute modest best. And today, interviewed on ABC News, this, now that he's president, is what he said.
Are you going to direct U.S. funds to pay for this wall? Will American taxpayers pay for the wall?
Ultimately, it'll come out of what's happening with Mexico. We're going to be starting those negotiations relatively soon, and we will be, in a form, reimbursed by Mexico, which I've always said.
So they'll pay us back?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So the American taxpayer will pay for the wall at first?
All it is we'll be reimbursed at a later date from whatever transaction we make from Mexico.
Mexico's president said in recent days that Mexico absolutely will not pay, adding that it goes against our dignity as a country and our dignity as Mexicans. He says, quite simply, they're not paying.
David, I think he has to say that. He has to say that. But I'm just telling you, there will be a payment. It will be in a form, perhaps a complicated form. And you have to understand, what I'm doing is good for the United States. It's also going to be good for Mexico. We want to have a very stable, very solid Mexico.
When does construction begin?
as soon as we can, as soon as we can physically do it. We're
within months?
I would say in months, yeah. I would say in
borders. Or are we all, as some believe, global citizens? To get involved, call me on 0345 6060 973. Text me at 84850. You can tweet me on @LBC. And don't forget the hashtag Farage and LBC. And you can watch the show live. Go to LBC's Facebook page now, as larger and larger numbers of you are doing, and the phones are going mad already. Daniel in Brentwood, is it right that a country should be able to put up a fence to protect itself?
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
I just want to say, I spoke to you a few weeks ago, it's good that Trump has stuck to his word like I knew he would and like you do. But I 100% believe in walls. Walls have been around since day dot. The Chinese constructed the greatest wall in the world to keep the Mongolians out. The Romans built the wall in Scotland at Hadrian's to keep the Northerners out of mainland England. And we've also had a wall built at Calais, which has slightly reduced the influx of migration onto British trucks into Europe. We need walls where there is soft borders, obviously, where there is no body of water to separate land. And I think a wall is a fantastic idea to separate Mexico from the United States of America.
So you're with Trump on this, yeah?
110%. 110%. He has to secure that border in any which way he can to prevent the mass migration of the people who are going to be detrimental to the US. 100%.
But when he says he's going to get Mexico to pay for it, does that sound a bit far-fetched to you?
Well, America has the physical power and the muscle, obviously, to ensure that happens. He'll obviously finance the war originally through American taxpayers' money, but
certainly planning is starting immediately.
He's going to do it, there's no doubt about it. But Trump aside, is it right that a country should be able to put up physical borders, or are we all global citizens? That's my question to you. Well, my view perhaps won't surprise you. I think good fences make good neighbours. I think not to have borders is complete madness. And I would say that what we saw in Berlin before Christmas perhaps sums it up. We have free movement of people within the European Union, a debate, of course, that featured heavily in our referendum. But we've never been members of the Schengen zone. The Schengen zone where you can move freely within those Schengen EU states without ever being stopped, ever showing a passport. And what happened was that horrendous truck killing in that Christmas market, that the most wanted man, not just in Europe, but at that moment in the world, was able, with impunity, to catch a train, to cross the border to France, and then on to Italy, where, frankly, by chance, he was caught. I think the point about no borders, the point about Schengen, the point about free movement, is it doesn't just allow good people to move freely, it allows bad people. It allows terrorists. It allows Kalashnikov rifles to move freely. And I think a dose of common sense is coming back into this whole argument. I think people are realising that actually you do need to protect your borders, particularly in an age of international terrorism. But my question to you isn't just about Trump. It is, I repeat, is it right that a country should put up physical
leading Britain's conversation?
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day!
When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour.
Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage.
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 The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Well, it's Trump again, isn't it? Because within the last few minutes, he's signed an executive order to begin construction of the US-Mexico border wall. That big, beautiful wall. He promised it throughout the campaign. He said, I'm going to build a wall, and everybody thought he was absolutely mad. And even madder, He said the Mexicans are going to pay for it 100%. Let's just remind ourselves, it's a 2,000-mile border between the US and Mexico. And many people thought this was going to be